Welcome back to part 2 of our explainer on the clock system. So today, we're getting into something that literally separates the novices from the experts. We're talking about the paralleling trap. It's crazy how misunderstanding one single, innocent-looking number on a transformer's nameplate can lead to, well, absolute catastrophe. You definitely do not want to get caught in this trap, so let's just jump right in. All right, first, a super fast recap of where we left off. Our golden rule from part 1. You take the clock number from the vector group, multiply it by 30 degrees, and boom, that's your exact phase displacement between the high and low voltage windings. So a DIN 11 transformer, that means the low voltage side leads the high voltage side by 30 degrees, or, mathematically, a 330-degree lag. That phase shift isn't just a suggestion. It is hardwired straight into the transformer's physical geometry. Because of that geometry, here's the crucial rule of thumb. Transformers can only be safely paralleled if they share the exact same vector group and phase displacement. Pairing a dyne 11 with another dyne 11? Perfectly safe. They're going to parallel completely cleanly. But trying to pair a dyne 11 with a dyne 1? No way. That is incredibly dangerous. And yeah, sure, they both belong to the dyne family, delta high voltage, Y low voltage. The letters match up fine. But that clock number? That completely changes the game. And here's exactly why you can't just mix and match. If you parallel mismatched vector groups, you end up creating this massive phase angle difference right across the bus. That difference acts like a giant pump, driving a circulating current so incredibly huge that it can literally melt and destroy the transformer windings within minutes. And honestly, the scariest part? This catastrophic winding damage happens even if you have zero external load connected to the system. Basically, the transformers just fight each other in a closed loop until they completely fail. Okay, think about the underlying logic here, like two actual clocks hanging side by side on a wall. Say one is set exactly to New York time, and the other is set perfectly to London time. They're both technically correct, right? Individually, they work flawlessly. But if you try to synchronize one coordinated activity based on reading both of those clocks at the exact same time, you're going to get absolute chaos. The clock system on a transformer isn't just some arbitrary naming convention. It's a highly engineered, direct safeguard against making this exact, incredibly expensive mistake. Now, in the electrical world, that chaos is represented by the number 300. A 300-degree mismatch is a real-world nightmare. It usually happens when a site has an existing DN11 setup running nicely, and then someone accidentally adds a new DN1 transformer to the mix. To an untrained eye, glancing at the paperwork, it looks like a tiny typo, just an 11 versus a 1. But electrically, it's a massive 300-degree chasm. You are trying to force together two systems that are almost entirely out of sync. And look, this happens way more often out in the field than you might think. A site needs to expand, so they order a new unit, but they only specify the kVA rating and the voltage class. The new transformer shows up, and it's a dyne 1. The kVA matches, the voltage class matches. Everything looks great on the nameplates, but that invisible 300-degree error is just lying in wait. The literal second someone closes those breakers to parallel the units, that phase mismatch drives a circulating current so violent it'll instantly trip the protection relays. Or, even worse, cause severe internal winding damage before the relays even have time to blink. So let's do a quick interactive check here to make sure we're totally aligned. Imagine you're standing on a site looking at two transformers. They have the exact same kVA rating, they have the exact same voltage class. Is that enough information to parallel them safely? Just take a second and really think about it. The answer is a hard, definitive no. As we've just seen, relying solely on capacity and voltage ratings is a super dangerous trap. The vector group and the clock number absolutely, positively must match identically. But the good news? You can now read a nameplate's vector group and instantly assess if they're compatible for paralleling. Dyne 11 only plays nicely with another dyne 11. Simple as that. Now, since everything we just talked about hinges on that nameplate being at 100% accurate, this takes us straight into factory acceptance testing. Let's look at an actual ABB FAT procedure for a 3500 kVA ship service transformer. Notice what's right at the top? Proving the transformation ratio and checking that phase displacement is literally the very first electrical test they do on the factory floor. They don't check insulation first, they don't look at losses, they immediately verify that the clock number and vector group are exactly what they claim to be. Which brings us to a core engineering philosophy. The nameplate is just a claim. The tests are the actual proof. Strict FAT procedures from manufacturers like ABB or Schneider Electric mandate these exact physical and electrical checks. They always start physical,
verifying lifting lugs, bolt torques, dimensions against the drawings, because, inadequate lifting ratings aren't going to show up on an electrical test. Then comes the electrical proof. Transformation ratio testing confirms the actual internal turns match the nameplate within a crazy tight plus or minus 0.5% tolerance. Phase displacement verifies the clock number is flawless. And finally, winding resistance is checked to be within 2% across all phases, which flushes out any loose internal connections or manufacturing defects.
So now that you know the catastrophic stakes of a mismatched vector group and just how crucial these factory acceptance tests really are, it leaves us with one pretty provocative question for our next explainer. Before a single volt of test electricity is ever applied to that transformer, how do we physically verify that the nameplate isn't lying? Like, what mechanical secrets are hiding inside that steel tank before it ever leaves the factory floor? Think about that for a bit, and we'll unpack the answers next time. Thanks for hanging out, and keep staying curious.